Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the brand new episode of the Techospace podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm honored and thrilled to welcome one of the most prominent and eminent industry leaders of the IT space and the enterprise architecture space, Mr. Graham Davis, who happens to be the enterprise architect for the company Practical Applications Technology Solutions Private Limited Company, and he's based out of Perth, Western Australia. So, Graham, it gives me an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this podcast episode of mine. So, Graham, how are you doing? And also, Graham, before we take it furthermore, I'm pretty much keen to go with the conclusion of talking about your naval journey, because I want to tell the audience that you had the experience of being in the British Royal Navy. So that is something that is that actually caught my attention. But before that, there are many more interesting stories that we are going to highlight in this podcast session. So yeah, so Graham, how are things in Perth at the moment? How is the pre-Christmas vibe going on?
Oh, well, it's pretty hot over here. I don't know about you over there, but it's been 37, 38 yesterday, so that's getting up there. And yeah, it's pretty hot today. And of course, Christmas is the usual nightmare of people and shopping and all the other festive things you get sorted out. And then we get into Christmas and Christmas periods of taking it easy a bit and spend some time with the family.
That's amazing. That's good to know. I think I feel that the Christmas time in Australia is pretty heated up, right? Because I've never been during the Christmas time. Christmas time is the time where I travel back, so that's like
right. Yeah, it's usually quite warm, but yeah, it looks like it's going to be a hot one this year. So
all right,
good.
All right. That's a good one, I would say. I mean, which is fine for for Indians, and because our weather is almost cloning weather. The Perth the weather of Perth and Hyderabad is almost similar. What I came to know from my friends, so I believe it is that.
Cool, that's good. And thanks very much for having me here today. And thanks very much for all your listeners for listening today.
Amazing, Graham. So, Graham, without any further ado, let's kick off with our podcast session. All right, Graham. So, let's talk about the timeline of your journey in the IT industry.
Certainly. So I started off over 40 years ago, joining the Royal Navy as an electronics engineer. So I was doing the training in the Navy and over in British Navy, and it was kind of interesting to actually get into electronics. And electronics engineering was the only discipline that was around at that point from an IT perspective. There was no IT. IT didn't exist. It was all about the hardware and therefore electronics. That was it. The computers that were around were Cold War era, and the Royal Navy was in the middle of the Cold War or the end of the Cold War, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. I spent some time training, obviously, and going away on warships, and I ended up looking after the main control system, the main computer system for the tactical and fire control systems on a warship. So it would even fly, and control missiles in flight and things like that. Very centralized. That was just where the technology was in those days. I suspect it's moved on significantly since then. Okay. And I finished my that career looking after a small team. I was only 26. That was quite young. In fact, all the rest of the team were older than me, so that was kind of interesting. I learned how to lead people the hard way, maybe. But yeah, that taught me a lot of things. So after the Royal Navy, I came out after 9 years. It's going to all sorts of different places. I ended up in an EMC engineer. That's electromagnetic compatibilities. So testing for RF. So testing radio frequencies around susceptibility and the radiation from each device. All your devices you have now have to go through this testing. So I was testing because the Navy had taught me all about RF and radio frequencies. So that was kind of cool. So following after that, I joined a company as a controls engineer. So controls in engineering is the PLCs and SCADA that actually create a whole set of factories. So making factories work. Nowadays, we call it operational technology. So I was controls engineering and I was doing all sorts of different factories, dairies, paper mills, and brewery, in fact. Okay. I actually put a brewery together as I was part of the team that put the controls system in the brewery. It was a whole brew house, and this was a very large room that they were manually and the control panel making beer. And this control panel was about 50, 60 meters long. So it was pretty big. And people would stand there and move dials around and things. And that's how they actually made it. By the time we'd finished, there was one little table in the front, and they had a computer on running Windows 311. So you could actually automate everything. So it was during that process that project that I worked out that because we were now using Ethernet, so which was coax, none of this Cat6 stuff. It was actually coax with 50 ohm terminators on it. That was early days. We had connected those together. I could actually run a simulation against the PLC as well as part of a SCADA. So it's the SCADA system and the PLCs and then a simulation. So I designed a very basic output-input control function for that. And we were able to simulate all the sequencing and everything way before we'd even got to the actual plant. So the plant went in really quickly, and it was a great success. So that was just me noticing that you can do some funky things with new technology. I mean, nowadays there's simulators that are available very easily, but like back in those days, that was the first time that we'd seen that. So that was kind of cool. So after that, I actually joined another company as a controls engineer, but this one time it was a pharmaceutical company. They made machines that made tablets and mostly tablets. So it was granulators and fluid bed dryers and other exciting stuff. I spent some time putting that lot together, and I was trying to at that point work out how I could abstract some of this code. So I was really into trying to understand how, because they had multiple machines and the machines only varied by the equipment that was on them. So I created a common abstracted sequencing function, and then depending on the machine, you actually just added different modules, which made it repeatable, which made it then reusable. So that was kind of fun. So following on from controls engineering, after 5 years of doing that, I moved into a software company. So I taught myself C++ by then, which was kind of hard fun. Yeah. Well, you had to, right? It was a ball and owl at that point, which was really old. So C++, and I'd got into a company called Omron Electronics, which was a factory automation company. They actually made the PLCs and the SCADA systems that actually fit, that people would then use to make factories work. So I started off with them, and they had a set of temperature controllers, and one of the first projects that I wrote was for temperature controllers, configuring temperature controllers. Temperature controller is that little device that sits in the bottom of a fridge, and you see them when you go to get your soda out. It tells you what temperature it is. It's controlling the compressor. So previously, it had been manually. You had to press the buttons in certain orders and try and work out how that works. I'd actually written a piece of software we would be able to configure and then download all the parameters. So that was kind of exciting, and that was a great success. So we then moved on to I got promoted into the main middleware system for the PLCs and compilers. That was a significantly bigger amount of work and a bigger team and a bigger software team to actually get going. And we had been doing various upgrades and changing bits of software, and I suddenly realized that this could be abstracted again. So when you start abstracting your software, you can actually just have device drivers effectively for the new assets as they start arriving. So we spent a few years putting that together, which was kind of fun, and that went on for many years after that point. So at that point, we emigrated. We were in the UK all the way through that period, and then we popped in and we popped over to Australia, and we settled here in Perth. And so my first job here in Perth was with a software company, and the software company was a piece of software that they had. Their product was around time series data, so historians and operational technologies one layer up. And this software was kind of new. They'd had some pretty success, and shortly after that, I became their architect, and we were starting to glue things together. But my journey had taken me at that point where I was not so much. I was really in the middle of trying to understand the product itself, but I was also not so much how that product fit into the main other people's enterprises, and that really got me thinking that there's a whole world of new things out there. And so after a couple of years of that, I actually did my first major capital project, and I went to work for a little company called Fortescue Metals Group, or FMG. It's now called Fortescue. At that point, it was around about 50 people. And I joined there as their architect, which was kind of fun. They didn't have much in the way of IT.
Okay.
And Fortescue Metals, or Fortescue as it's known now, is one of the largest mining companies in Australia.
Mhm.
So that's quite a great migration, starting off from a very early days of that function. And I'd really at that point trying to work out what was actually going on. What architecture was there available for me to pull in and start using? Now, how's a mining company operate? How does all these things? Unfortunately, there was nothing. There was nothing that I could pin anything on. We had a bit of an understanding of the MES layer and ISO 95, but there was very little in the way of real how do you do architecture and how do you do solution architecture. So I spent some time putting together a whole load of systems and making their enterprise get bigger and bigger, and adding new layers in that we'd never seen before. It's pretty new and understanding. And then after a few years, I moved on to my second major capital project. And this one was a company called Chevron. And they had a gas plant, which was the Gorgon gas field, which was on the northern edge of Western Australia. And they had decided that they were going to put a large gas plant in a Class 4 nature reserve, which added a few interesting elements to it. But on day one, I went around and asked for previous architecture on gas plants, and they unfortunately were not able to give me anything. So there was nothing again. So I in fact was given a sheet of paper with 5 boxes on it. And I was basically, that's what we got. And I was okay, so we got 5 boxes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So let's work out how to take the next step. Take from an almost nothing to how do we actually get an operating plant. And at that point, I was starting to realize that the operational piece of architecture is repeatable. You can make it repeatable. So even though your enterprises you're doing are all different, the technology that you're doing, they are different, the processes, everything is different, but the processes that you do and the processes that you do, they're all the same. You can actually make them repeatable and therefore get value out of them. So after a very short while, I became the lead architect. And at that point, I'd actually written their high-level solution architecture template. So how to do solution architecture in a document, follow the bouncing ball. And that was back in 2010. So, and I created it out of my experience from doing FMG and a little bit of understanding. So it's all about operational architecture. Doing the same thing repeatably is really important.
Yep.
So following on after 4 years of the Gorgon gas plant and the Gorgon project as a lead architect, I then closed down the project and moved on, handed it over to the operating teams, and then left that project, which was great. It was they were taking it through commissioning. So the next stage on from that was the next major capital project I did was a little company called Roy Hill. Roy Hill is a large mining company now, and one of the largest in Australia again. And at that point, it was a very small company, and it was before it actually went live. So we started off putting together some architecture, putting together some definition. I joined as their EA, and shortly after that, I became their manager of architecture, planning, and strategy. So actually started running the team. Now, what was different about that was that the team was actually extremely knowledgeable, but we also started putting the practices in place that I had done in previous major capital projects. And it started growing and working really well. So that was kind of exciting. There was a whole load of different things that we did, a lot of enterprise architecture around defining the capability modeling across the whole operations team. And we'd gone from end to end on the operations in that task. So that was kind of exciting. So after Roy Hill, which I had really had a fun time with 5 years later, I actually joined a little company called Synergy, which is the electricity company here in WA. It's in the main non-regional area, and it's both the generator and the retailer, but it also sells energy on the wholesale market as well. And I spent a bit of time as an enterprise architecture consultant with them, defining what that capability could actually look like. What would that capability be around distributed energy resources? So they wanted to know. They didn't have it. There were only those three things. This was the fourth capability they were looking at getting into. So we put some definition around what that would be, and then we started a project, which is a trial project called Project Symphony, which was about distributed energy resources, which is renewables, batteries and solars and other devices in people's homes. And we were trialing this for real. So we put batteries in solar and actually started controlling them. And then we were from a centralized control system that would actually control that and also simulate selling that energy on the market as with AMO. So we were doing some quite significant things, and it was the first time they had done that. So that was a large project that 3 years later, I left that. And in the last 2 years, I have spent as an enterprise architecture consultant for a large conglomerate and also for a government agency. So that's where I've been for the last 2.5 years. And now I'm starting to work for a whole different company, which is great. And we'll talk about that later.
Surely. Yes, we can stay updated on that, Graham. Now, Graham, in one of the conversations, you told me that, you actually created a solution for a brewery. So what exactly, gave you that inspiration and, the drive to actually, venture into that space? And which winery was that associated with?
So it's a brewery in the UK. It was called Courage at that point, and it was in Reading in the UK. So the company itself had wanted to do an upgrade. So it wanted to change its entire control system, and so all the P&IDs were created of what they could actually do, and they wanted to be able to do washing at the same time as they're brewing beer. So you don't want caustic mixing beer, so they have to be quite on different lines and doing different things. So they designed what they wanted to do, and as in how they could do it. They got some engineering in, got the whole designs of the P&IDs, and then from that point onwards, it was actually coming up with the design of how to actually do that. Okay. So that was kind of exciting, and yes, we did get to test the beer, and even more interesting, there's actually a job. Well, there was a job that was actually tester. So they would actually test beer. I mean, what a job! I kind of fancy that one. Yeah.
That's an amazing timeline, Graham. Now, Graham, would you like to, talk about your roles and responsibilities, being the enterprise architect for your company, Practical Applications Technologies Solutions Private Limited. So how would you like to, sum it up?
So I after many years of operating architectural practices, I created practicalEA.com for architects to really learn architecture and operational architecture. So operational architecture is the elements of the practices and processes that you put in place that are repeatable, that allow you to ensure that you actually get value out of your architectural practice. Yep. And the way you get value is by ensuring that what you're creating, the initiatives that you're doing, are aligned with the business needs and the enterprise architecture. So you've got to make sure that it actually is going to be going in the right direction. The second thing you've got to do is to ensure that the design is actually going to work once it's been deployed. And the third thing you have to do is to make sure that the design is the very best design that it can be. And this is quite hard to do. The way to do it is actually in your architectural practice, is to set up the processes and practices that you need to do in order to achieve that. And one of the key elements is your architectural practice that drives review and validation of each of the designs. So I've met many architects. I've worked with a huge number of them, but I've never met an architect that isn't clever. Every single architect is really clever, but they only have their current outcome and outputs are based on their own experience. How do they know, and how does they make things work? When you put an architectural practice in place and you are having operational architecture, you are validating to the knowledge of all of the architects. and therefore you're actually going to meet those three outcomes and actually start providing value back to your enterprise. So that's kind of important to me, and that's why I created practicalea.com. It
Okay.
is about operational architecture and ensuring that architects can do things repeatably in order to get the value to their enterprises.
That's amazing. Like you told me that, Practical, the company that you have, started. So I just wanted to know that, you told me that earlier it's a conglomerate. So when I understand the conglomerate, it's, a combination of people, who are actually investing in that entire project. So, I mean, does the conglomerate, consist of people from the UK? I mean, your friends who are based in UK, or let's say your colleagues who are based in UK, or are there people, locally from Australia? Look, how is the conglomerate, comprised of?
So architects are across every project. So
Yeah.
depending if I was actually the manager, I would actually go out selecting architects, and my hit rate is actually really low. So out of 20 architects that you would see in CVs and want to interview, you'd probably interview about 12, and out of that I might get one. So it's really hard to find the right level of architect, the right quality that actually knows it. Otherwise, you're actually bringing people up. You're actually showing them how to do this, and it just takes a
Yeah.
little longer. So where are the architects? The architects are usually locally. So in the same space as part of the same project, the same program of work, and across any enterprise, you would have typically, a larger enterprise would be some 7 to 10 architects, and a really large enterprise you can have 100. So
Right.
architects
Yeah.
are all over the place, and they're all different flavors as well. So nobody is born.
Yeah.
Nobody's born an architect. They are not. They come from other technical disciplines.
Yeah.
So they come from software programming and development, or they come from technology and servers and networks, or they come from data management and data wrangling and data engineering. That's where they tend to come from. And so they actually build them way up through until they become solution architects, and then maybe onto enterprise architects as well. So
Okay.
no, it's actually a function of where they are in their journey, and where they're
Yeah.
actually going, what they've actually come from as to what their experience is. What the architectural practice and operational architecture does is normalize that, so that everybody gets to actually review, and everybody will then make that design the very best it can be based on all those different experiences and all those different viewpoints.
Fantastic, Graham. That's a very insightful point. Now, Graham, heading on to this, I'm pretty much, keen to ask you this question. Like, would you like to, share your experience of, first ever creating your first ever software program? So, what
Oh.
went with that actually?
Back in 1983, I wrote my first.
Oh,
1983,
okay.
I wrote my first software program on a micro computer called a BBC. This was pre-PCs architecture.
Okay.
And it was in BASIC, so it had line numbers and go-to statements. Very scary by today's standards, but it was just where we were at that point. This was really early days, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was only a few weeks after that I'd written that program that I actually it was part of the naval training that I was on. They actually took me for a programming course, and which was fascinating, I thought. And the guy that was running it said, "Okay, so split yourselves into two teams. One of you, one team that knows what they're doing, go into this room, and those that don't, go into that room." So I thought, well, it wasn't that long ago that I was writing, so I might as well go into the room that nobody knows, right? Everyone's going to be brilliant at this. So I walked in there, and they showed me to log on and gave me a task, and a few minutes later it was quite a simple task, so it wasn't that hard to generate. And so I got the guy to validate it, and then he said, "Oh, come with me to the other room." So okay, so I passed this test, and I went to the other room, and it was just the same as the first room. There was everybody not knowing what they were doing. So what I learned from that was, no matter how much you think you don't know, or how uncertain you are of your own skills, then you probably are much greater than you think you are. So that taught me going forward
Yeah, that's
to
right.
be confident and give it a go.
I mean, I just love the statement of yours, no matter how uncertain you are, that is the time actually you figure it out that, you need to upskill yourself into that particular pursuit, or let's say in that field. So which is
Yes.
really, really insightful. Now, having said that, like everyone, the listeners will definitely ask you this question, Graham, probably offline. They might that, you started your first, I mean, you did your first ever software program. So, but which language was that in? Where did that basis
It,
start from?
it was in basic because there were sorry, sorry, I cut you off. It was in basic, as in a version of basic that was pretty simplistic, even by those stages. But what it told you how to do, I mean, is how to manipulate arrays and strings and all that stuff out of life. So it
Yeah,
wasn't very exciting. It was just that's what there was at the time.
yeah,
Unless you went to Pascal or something like that. But yeah, it was a form of basic, probably BBC B basic, which was the machine that I was
yeah.
writing it on.
All right. So, do you have, going back to the, 1983, do you remember that particular day, or do you remember the exact time, when you wrote this software program? Do you have any fond memories of that, in the
Oh,
UK, somewhere in your home?
yeah. It was in the UK, and I was in the Royal Navy at that time, so we were staying on base, and there was very little to do. You could either go and have a beer or stay there and do some homework or something. So this
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
had a BBC B, and he said, "Oh, I'm learning this basic stuff," and I said, "Oh, yeah, for
Okay.
programming."
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, let's give it a go. So we sat down, and it was I took to it pretty well. So I knew I was going to be much more able to do that in the future when I needed it. It's my analytical mind to be able to do that.
Right.
So so yeah,
Yeah. That's amazing, Graham. So, which part of UK? I mean, were you based in then? In the naval base.
which part of England? It was down south in Portsmouth. So
Oh,
Portsmouth is
Portsmouth.
a
Okay.
very big naval base. So you might have heard of it. And there are many bases around that are for training with different disciplines around mechanical, electrical, electronics, and air defence, as well as submarines and things. So I was in the electronics school, learning about electronics and becoming a chief petty officer in the Royal Navy at 26 was kind of scary.
That's pretty much interesting, Graham. Now, Graham, would you like to give me an in-depth insight, on the new online courses that you're providing for architects around the world, in your initiative?
Certainly. So practical EA, as I said, it's written for architects. It is for architects to learn how to do operational architecture. It is really important, and for getting that value back into their enterprises. But they're also to establish your operational architecture. You can't just go from a collection of architects to suddenly being great. You actually have to go through different stages. And so I created 4 stages that you would go through. The first one being an MVP,
Hmm.
a a minimal viable product or a minimal viable architecture, an
Yeah,
architecture function that is doing some of the operational architecture, but you don't have all of it. You just get there quickly so that you can start
yeah,
understanding how to do it and how to do architecture and how to validate it, which is really important. And then the second stage is actually establishing it. So you're establishing your practice. You're actually adding in far more artifacts and processes that will actually give you better outcomes. And then the stage following after that is a stable stage. So this is where you are stabilizing your practice to be completely repeatable. And that is a series of elements. You're adding in new ways of working, but you're really trying to stabilize it. And that's also where you have your maximum amount of governance structure around your architecture practice. Then when you get to the fourth stage, the enhanced stage, you are now optimizing. You're optimizing your architecture practices so that you have a better throughput. You can actually get there quicker. And also it really helps when all the architects know all the processes and know how it works, because they can then optimize it really quickly. So
yeah.
so that's great. I only got there once in one architecture in one company, so in one architecture practice.
Right. That's a very, what do I say, a structured kind of an approach, which is really good. Now, Graham, always, when it comes to the online courses, the first question that everyone will ask, or let's say, my listeners might ask if they, if they reach out to you, is how much do you charge, for your online courses for the architects that, you're trying to give training to?
Certainly. It's a subscription service, and what I've tailored this to is not to the architects; it's actually to the companies that are actually they're going to be providing value to. And
Okay.
so I've structured this that a one license will cost $4,400 a year, but includes three
Okay.
seats. So
Mhm.
three architects, because that's sort of the median number of architects you have in a practice. So you
Yeah.
have three architects running for $4,400 a year, which works out to be just over $1,400 or something for
Right.
each person to gain
Okay.
access to a way of operating that will take you years to actually accomplish.
Right. I mean that's a
So
very good start, especially with respect to the question. Yes, Graham. I'm sorry I interrupted you in between.
no problem. No problem. So how much does it cost? So the license is for, as I said, $4,400 for the company. Yep,
Yeah.
and that includes three architects can actually gain access to it. Yep.
Fantastic. Okay.
So it works out to be $1,400. Yeah.
So probably I can just put it like this, suppose if there are three friends and they want to, avail to your services, probably three of them will come together and they'll go for that particular subscription that you're offering, which is very good
Absolutely.
kind of offer, to be honest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I priced this quite deliberately, quite low,
Yeah.
really quite not expensive. And the reason why we've done this is because I want architects around the world to start using this and to start making better architecture. And there is so much confusion around architecture in so many different ways. No, lots of people think they know what architecture is. Not many of them are actually doing it. It's important to not hide behind confusion and to actually have processes that actually work and will deliver value back to your enterprise.
That is absolutely true. Graham, now, Graham, the $1 million question to you is like, according to you, or, if you try to understand this, what is your take on the issues that, that are faced in the world of enterprise architecture?
Yeah, so I touched on one already. I can answer this in two different ways. For
Okay.
enterprise architecture itself, it is the
Right.
fact that we have so much confusion around what is
Yep.
architecture. How do you do it, and how do you get the most out of it? Well,
Yep.
the answer is operational architecture. It is the practices and processes that are repeatable to repeatably give you the outcomes that you're after.
Yep.
That is
Yep.
really important to achieve. So that's why we created practicalEA.com is to allow people to understand how to do this in a really simplistic step-by-step way. So that's important from my perspective, from the actual architectural discipline itself. But from of course from the actual technology that architects play with all the time, it's got to be AI. AI is in the news, and it's probably everyone's going to be booing me now because I'm
Everywhere.
talking about AI. Yeah, I do apologize, but my take is slightly different. My
Okay.
take is that architects, AI is about isn't it should be stop be treated as a technical category. It's not a disrupting technology. It's an enabling technology that we can apply to every other piece of technology that we do.
Which is true. Yeah.
And because of that, we haven't yet worked out how to apply that across all those different technology pieces.
Hmm.
And so we don't have the governance in place. We don't know how to control and manage each of those things to get the results that we expect from them. So AI is a big topic, but it needs to go through that process across all of the technologies. And let's stop talking about it as a technology in its own right, because it's only an enabler that helps every other piece of technology.
Absolutely agreed. So, I mean, did you ever have a situation, or let's say, is there any use case where you personally, as you have, tried AI, in your work of enterprise architecture anytime?
Yes, I have. I've used it many times. Not only
Okay.
ChatGPT, but also using it for generating things, helping me write some certain documents, but also some more complicated elements of defining a whole set of elements that are standardized in your practice. Getting AI to actually run through a sequence and make some real decisions based on real data had had me really confused. I mean, the prompts were quite large,
Yeah, yeah.
but the AI kept acting like a 7-year-old. I felt like I was talking to a 7-year-old. You know, so can you show me the output? And it's like, yeah, okay, and it gives you 3 lines, and it's like, can you show me the rest? And it says, hang on a minute, I'll just go and check. I'll just go and work it out. Well, no, it's like it's not quite there yet. It's not certainly not as advanced as some people may think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it really is. If you try and do anything complicated for writing documents and for creating things that it has access to the data, it's single step, brilliant. If you try going from a really long set of complex things that it's got to work it out, it's not. It really feels like it's a 7-year-old.
It is actually a 7-year-old, and it'll take that 7-year-old to actually, upscale itself and, come to that stage where, we are expecting it to be for.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And we've got to work out how to get the right outcomes from it. So that's going to be a particularly challenging function for us.
100%, Graham, 100%. Even I also tried many number of times, generating a document. I mean, basically, generating an Excel list. But, that takes its own time and it's very difficult. Sometimes, you have to speak it to like a human, saying that, you can do better. I mean, this is not right. You're not getting it. You're not getting it. I mean, it feels like, you're talking to a kid, but rather than, you're actually talking to the technology enabler.
Indeed. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, it does. It has had its own challenges, and I just don't feel very certain as to what the answers are going to be. It seems to be very generic because it's all language based. It really is. Coming from a programming language and multiple programming languages, everything is very specific and always going to give you the right outcome. It's deterministic unless you've written some code that isn't. So in most terms, trying to run AI when it gives you generic things that don't actually aren't repeatable is actually quite difficult.
Indeed. Graham, that completely, explains the point. Now, Graham, like in your journey, are there any interesting anecdotes and success stories that, you have experienced till now that you would like to, share in this podcast session?
Sure. So during my third major capital project that I was doing, I was visited by the CIO one day who said, Graham, can you help out? We actually have a problem around onboarding people in a mining company. Is quite a complex process. It involves about 10 or so different systems and processes that span across multiple business units. It's really quite complicated, and they obviously having some real problems trying to implement solutions and outcomes. So I assembled the people that were involved from multiple different business units, and it soon became pretty clear that this was an adaptive challenge. It was not a technical problem. It wasn't a lot to do with technology. It was really around understanding the process and understanding how we could actually solve some of those problems. So I went away and had a think about how I could deal with this because it was clear it wasn't going to work through normal means. So then I came up with an answer and went back to them and said, okay, so I've come up with this great idea. What we're going to do is use one of the systems and we're going to use it for all the other parts of the process. So we'll remove all those other technologies and we'll just use this one for everything. To which the entire room was horrified. And nobody thought that was a good idea at all, which was fine. I'd also told them that I'd organised with that particular vendor to come in and do a discovery piece. So to understand why their technology wouldn't work or could work in all those different situations. About 3 months later, we'd gone through a lot of iterations and found a lot of things. I was summoned to a meeting, and someone actually explained to me in glorious technical detail why that technology wasn't going to work and why what I had said was not going to work. To me, this was music to my ears because what they had actually done is gone through and understood every part of the process. They'd all understand the data and how to move the data and which is the best solution in each one of those points. So to me, it was great. What I had given them was the mandate to move outside their business units and had to actually understand the process, and also a burning platform. That if you don't do it, you're going to get this technology that probably isn't going to work and make your life worse. So that to me was a great success. And And I didn't know if it's going to work to start with, but it did, and the results were fantastic. From that point onwards, it was just a program of technical problems to actually
Right.
get new technology to work.
That's a very interesting insight, Graham. But Graham,
Mm.
sometimes, I mean, since you just gave me an example, where your entire crew, or let's say your entire team was horrified. So, to handle that kind of a resistance, or let's say that rejection from people, what do you exactly do? Do you, give them an assurance, in verbal, or do you, tell them that, you see what I'm doing, then we can talk? What is your
Oh yeah.
approach basically like?
So, indeed. So I actually told the architects in the team what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. I also told the primary stakeholder, so he knew what was going on as well. It was just the rest of the team that needed to understand the process, that hadn't ever got together and worked collaboratively. That we needed to get on board with that. And I found the easiest way was to mandate something that wasn't going to work. So,
Okay.
so it was really trying to. The architects knew what was going on, but the people did not.
Yeah. That's amazing, Graham. Graham, I know, we had a discussion about this, and you actually, in your timeline, you have just, broken that down into fragments and you gave me. But in detail, I want to talk about this, like exactly what went for, behind creating this. So having said that, Graham, would you like to, talk about, creating these three major capital projects and leading them? So what went into that exactly?
Oh, so that was really worrying and concerning when I started each one. So
Okay.
it was a major progression. So in the early days, we were defining capabilities and capability modeling, which at that time we didn't know what was. We used to call it functions and domains. It was areas of the enterprise that we had to define how to make things work, and we just had as placeholders that would allow us to put technology into those boxes. So in the early days, we were inventing how to do those types of things. Of course, when capabilities came around, in probably 14 or something like that, we started using them in a much more constructive way, and understanding that the process and the people and technology and the data of a capability are absolutely essential to understand. Actually helps us to drive those things. But it's also not only that, it's also coming from the first one and then going to the second one, actually using that experience of how architecture and technology works, but also architectural practices. So ensuring that you understand and put in place the architectural operational pieces that would allow you to validate and ensure that what you are doing is actually going to work and is going to really stand up on its own 2 feet as the best answer. So it is incredibly difficult. By the time I got to the third one, I think I had a good understanding of how to do it. We were starting to really make things going, and I had a fantastic team. The architecture team in Roy Hill was truly exceptional.
Okay.
They were able to drive themselves by the end. They were optimizing themselves and really making a significant difference. So that was really quite impressive. But as far as the whole MCP thing, it was always horror around and the enormity of what you're doing. If you've actually got to build a whole enterprise and you don't have anything, not only do you not have any designs or any way of knowing what's supposed to be in it, you also don't have the people to go and ask, because they're not onboarded yet. The company is not built yet. So you've got to have the right level of people and the right timing to get the right level of people, or not too early and not too late. You can't be late on a major capital project, because you don't want to have that conversation that IT is holding the project up, not the multi-billions of dollars it costs. But it's also
Yeah.
but it's also just the enormity, and also not knowing what you are trying to build and trying to build it. We have had multiple discussions around if you want to, in a major capital project, if you want to have a meeting, you have to actually first build the table. But in a major capital project, you have to actually go out and chop down the tree in order to build the table, in order to have a meeting. So you are that far behind. You've actually got to do a lot of planning and get your timing just right. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Absolutely, Graham. Now, Graham, when you actually led these capital projects, and when you were working for the mine and company, like whether it was FMG or Roy Hill, what was the first thing that you have observed? When you saw the technology, like what was your instant reaction? Seeing the technology there.
What when it's actually operating, you mean?
Yes, like first time when you went there, and you saw that you had the staff members of 2 to 10 people. I would say if I'm getting that number correct.
Yes.
So how did you feel that what I mean? How do you improve the technology from there? Like what was your initial thought when you exactly saw
All
things
right.
there?
All right. So in any enterprise, there is a lot of different pieces, and in a typical enterprise, there's 100 to 200 key elements and key pieces of the puzzle. You've probably got a couple of thousand small pieces, but
Yeah.
somewhere between 100 and 200 different elements. So you are trying to understand how they're going to fit together in this enormous, great patchwork quilt. And how does that actually feel? How does that? Which bits are missing, and how do you actually get to understand how to replace things, how to uh, put the new things in and new technology and go after those things, and understand what are the most important, and to get the business really stakeholders involved in that prioritization process. So
Yep.
so what do I feel? I always feel horrified at the enormity of the project
Yeah, yeah.
and the enormity of what's involved, but also challenged. And yeah, by the time you get to the third time, put into place the operational architecture practices, and it starts working.
Right. That's absolutely an insightful and your insightful point, and that actually sums up everything for me. Now in your entire enterprise architecture journey, like out of all the projects that you have worked, Ram, which one did you enjoy the most, and which one did you find the most challenging out of all?
So the one I enjoyed the most was Roy Hill, purely because we got the furthest. We got from a reasonable practice to through to a stable practice, and then started optimizing. Actually, getting how do you change the practices and the processes so that you can get architecture done faster. That is really that's a hard thing to do. So had a fantastic team. They were really insightful and able to keep up with us, and they were driving a lot of things. So that was probably my most enjoyable architectural endeavor that I did out of
Right.
that. But from the worst one, the most least exciting one. I think I was more concerned when I started my first practice, as in trying to understand how to do architecture.
Right.
Almost 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had some frameworks. They didn't tell you lots of things. It was really hard to understand what to say and how to actually do it. What was it about? So I had really tried to understand how to do the big project, how to do what we were trying to do, understand what mining was, when there's very few people around to actually ask, and there is no reference architecture. There's no book to make this work, and the enormity of what you're doing. It's like start off one step at a time, understand what you're going to do, understand the key pieces, and understand how to actually do it. So,
Right.
so that was frightening because of the enormity of what's involved, and that just takes you back to yeah, be bold, take the risk, understand the risk, and try and minimize the effects of the risk. So it's yeah, it's a long time ago, but it was kind of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Interesting. When you told me that, you went to Roy Hill, and, Roy Hill is somewhere in the northern part of, Western Australia. So, I mean, did you stay back, in the western part of Australia, or, were you, commuting between Perth and, to that region? Like, how was your itinerary back then?
So, so the whole mining operation, there is the piece that's actually at the mine. There's a big long railway line, and that
Oh,
takes
okay.
the ore to the port, and then the port actually puts it on a ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all of that is operated out of a major operations center back in Perth. So the main head
Okay.
office was there. So they operate most of their operations from there. So that's where we did most of our work. But we did go and see every aspect of the entire operation.
Yeah.
Very very privileged to be in that function. So yeah.
That's interesting. So do you remember, that drive of yours, when you went all the way from Perth to that place in Western Australia? Since I understand Western Australia is a huge province in
Yes.
Australia.
Yes.
So how
Yes.
are those drives like, traveling all the way
Okay.
there?
So we don't drive there. We catch a plane. They have their own
Oh,
airfield.
okay. Right. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yeah, of
interesting.
course. So we've got FIFO people, for people flying in and flying out, and so
Okay.
they'll do their shift for a week or two on site. They're staying
Yeah.
in a camp. There's a whole camp that
Okay.
of places, and it's got its own swimming pool and that sort of thing, and eating places and gyms and all that stuff because it's a camp,
Right.
and then you've got the mine site, and then there is another mining area up at
Yeah.
the port as well, which has a rail element to it and a port operations, and that has a commercial because it's a major port. It has a commercial airport, whereas in the case of Roy Hill or any of the Fortescue mining areas, they will have their own airport. Basically, they'll build their own landing strip,
Yeah.
and yes,
That's
so
interesting. I mean,
an operation is pretty big.
huge
Sorry.
operation and pretty much sorted. Everyone needs everything and whatever they require, everything is provided. And flight is very much convenient. When I was thinking about it, I was like, how you people, you manage it out because such a huge province it is. And when you told me flight, I was like, oh my God, like that's a big savior, to be honest.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So part of the onboarding process is to
Yeah.
ensure that they've got accommodation at the camp, but also that they have actually booked on an aeroplane to get up there. So
Yeah.
so it's quite a large set of processes.
Interesting, Graham. Now, Graham, would you like to, talk about your transition, from the space of the British Royal Navy all the way into the enterprise architecture space to our listeners across the world who are hearing to this?
Certainly. So when I reflect on where I've come from, where I'd go to, I feel incredibly lucky. I am the first to go all the way through from non-IT through architect defining software engineering through to actually architecture. This is architecture hasn't been around for that long. Probably around 20 years ago, there was not much of it happening. There was people doing some solution architecture, but not so
Mhm.
much of anything else. So we called it business planning or other things, but the structure and how to actually do it wasn't well known at that point. So
Yep.
I think I've gone on a personal journey. I've gone from the atomic, as in making a thing work, with controls engineering and software engineering and making software products, to then how does that software product actually fit into an enterprise? And then understanding an entire enterprise of all the different pieces and the patchwork quilt and how to actually make it fit together. So from my perspective, I have been extremely lucky, but I've also been supported by an enormous amount of really clever people along the way. So a huge number of architects and that actually want to get the job done, and we've all learned along the way. So I've been incredibly privileged to actually do that.
That's amazing, Graham. Now, Graham, when we talk about, your journey in the British Royal Navy, and in the starting also,
Mm.
you told me that, that's where you actually started understanding the technology. And, it was all about electronic engineering back then rather than the IT per se right now that everyone is experiencing like on a large scale. So when you reflect back at that journey of yours, like what was the technology that you saw, in the British Royal Navy? Like what was the first thing that you remember there?
Um, so I looked after the main computer systems. So this was discrete computers that had only a few K of memory, which is like the size of an
Oh,
icon now, you know. and we used to run the whole the ship out of it. So at that time they were putting man on the moon with only 1K of memory. So yeah, there was which it is. I mean, it was really small computing systems, but very optimized for their tasks.
okay.
So technology was really computers were discrete. They were actually made of components. There's no chips.
Mhm.
There were chips for discrete,
Yeah.
occasional electronics, but there was no major chips like there are today. So your computer came in whole wardrobes full of
Mhm.
full of cards basically that were acting functions, and they you had to make it work because it used to fall apart, because
Right.
you're on a ship and it vibrates and things move around. So you were electronics wise understanding how that technology would fit. As I became later on, and it would control missiles in flight, tracking from radar, and all sorts of exciting stuff, and control the main screens that go around in the ops room, and fight the war. So that was back in those days. But we actually moved into technology that is continuously progressing. The
Mhm.
different sets of languages. I recently tried writing some C++ the other day, and I found that it was horrible. I still can write. I can still write .NET code, but the actual
Yeah.
management of memory to do anything, it just took forever to do anything. It
Right.
was I spent a lot of time. So the technology has moved. It's moved now that you can get AI to generate it for you. Fantastic. But is that actually teaching us actually how things work, or are we actually standing back from it and letting other technology do what we should really know? So understanding and validating that is kind of important. But that means we've got to know in our own right, and the only way we can know that is if we actually know it and actually try doing it ourselves.
Absolutely, completely agreed with that, Graham. Now, Graham, always I have this, this fascination and that kind of curiosity when I want to, think about this. Since you worked in the Royal Navy, I want to, take this opportunity of asking you this, like, how was the technology like when it was, with respect to the radar in the, in the
Right.
submarine, or let's say, which the British Royal Navy was using?
Mm. So of course radar was good. Um, of course, I can't talk about lots of things,
Yeah, yeah,
because the technology in radar. I don't know if it's moved on a long way since then.
yeah,
But
yeah,
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 so there's pointing radars, there's long range radars, and medium range radars. There's
yeah,
the
yeah.
pointing radars is what actually locks onto the target, and the missile then obviously keeps going, and it gets reflection back and blows things up. So yep, that's kind of fun. Also, yeah, radars are a very known function from World War II. So during World War
Yeah.
II, they were generating radar. So we understood the electronics that was involved in that. I think the
Yep.
thing that has moved on in radar terms is the post processing. Is the processing that we can use computers for in real time to actually do real analysis of the waveforms and the responses to detect things a lot further away with a lot less power. So the radars have moved on. I have no doubt about that. But
Yep.
they were quite advanced when I was there, even in the
Yeah, yeah.
80s, because they've been around for 40 years before that.
Now I think they're super advanced, and I really feel that there is a complete huge evolution of radar technology, which is really really good and such a great development for the people in the British Royal Navy and elsewhere in different navies for that matter. So that was that. So that is pretty much an insightful point, Graham. Now, Graham, before we actually conclude with our podcast session or come to a halt with it, so we're going to take a pretty lighter route in the form of a rapid fire round. All this while completely I was bombarding you with the questions about your journey, about your timeline, then, about the three major capital projects that you were part of, that you've created, and, about Roy Hill, especially, where you just were giving a lot of insights. But this time in the rapid fire round, we're not going to go anything too technical or anything about your journey, but we're going to talk a lot about your likes and interests. So are you ready with the first question of the rapid fire round, Graham?
But by all means, bring it on.
Perfect then. All right. So the first question to you, Graham. So, Graham, what is your favorite hobby? I mean, in your favorite pastime?
I actually like to ride my motorcycle. I've got a 1250 motorcycle that I get out and ride around on. I ride to work whenever I'm in the city. So I like to do that. And then I also I have some young grandchildren, so I like to catch up with the family and get in sit around the pool and enjoy the Western Australian summers, which we're in the middle of right now. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yes, this is the best time for me. So that's what I love to do. It is, we watch Netflix and things, but most of the time I like to be outside and with friends and maybe drink some beer.
Right. Amazing,
So
amazing. Yeah. That's really a good good way of to doing, and it's always good to spend time with family and enjoy, and especially Netflix. Yeah, that's the thing that you require. For sure.
Yep. So that's what everybody does, right? Netflix.
Yeah, it's a universal thing now. It's a household name. Everyone just says, "Let's have some Netflix," and just chill out. So that's the acronym right now for everyone.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Talking about motorcycle rides, right? You love, going on your motorcycle. So now when I talk about it, did you ever, go on a motorcycle ride, all the way from Perth to the interior parts of Western Australia, or let's say Australia for that matter?
Definitely not. Definitely not. No,
Okay.
Western Australia is so big. It is so massive. I mean, WA itself is really, really enormous,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
sparsely outside of Perth, where there is 3 million people. Outside of Perth, there is almost nobody. There is less
Hmm.
than 1 million people out everywhere else. And this is, I don't know how many UKs we can fit into it, but it's something like 7 or 8 actually just into WA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
All
it,
right.
it, it is really, really big, and it's really, really massive. And there's nothing outside of Perth. There is a few minor towns and places, but not too many. So we are really, and everything's on the coast. So yeah,
Yeah,
Perth
yeah.
is 180 kilometers long, but in most
Oh,
cases it's only 4 to 10 kilometers wide. So it's not very wide, but it's really, really long. So I
it's
don't have to
huge.
go outside of Perth. I think
Yeah.
it's one of the longest cities in the world now. It's really, really long, but it's really, really
Yeah.
thin. So I don't have to go very far in the middle. I can just go
Yeah.
up and down all these places inside of Perth.
All
Yeah.
right then. So since you talked about Netflix, so what is your favorite Netflix show? Let's say the movie that you like to, see on Netflix.
Uh, Movies. I like action movies. The whole Iron Man type movies and those types of
Okay.
things. So I'm much more of an action fan. And who done it? So who is those detective movies? I like some of those. Yeah, but I like sci-fi. I've always watched some of the sci-fi. Yeah, I love some of those old Star Trek
Yeah.
elements. And yeah, I mean they invented the iPad 15 years before the iPad came out. So so they'd imagined it. I mean, it was really impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the type of tablets. So it was great that they were really truly inspirational and able to really understand and think about the new way of working. And some of those sci-fis are now looking a bit old. We're looking at that going, that's not very good technology. But just think of the sci-fis that we're looking at now. What that will look like in 50 years time. You know?
It's going to go a bit weird, I would say, to be honest, because I like the movies. Even, trust me, I don't come from the 80s or 70s era, but I prefer seeing all the old movies. The last time I watched a movie called A Bridge Too Far, and I don't even come from that era. I'm a person who's from the 90s. So when I saw that movie, I'm like, wow, there's so much, so much classiness in this. And I'm like, today's movies, they lack that. So,
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, there are some good movies nowadays. I think there really is.
yeah.
Some of the movies are really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So love watching Netflix. Love some of the movie functions. Yeah, got a bit weird in COVID time when there
Mm.
doesn't seem to be any movies being made, and we were watching movies from Korea or something. But it got a bit strange in that space. But most of the time, it's been pretty good.
Yep, yep. Understood. That's pretty much interesting. I think, when you talk about, talking about iPad that was created in Star Trek, I believe, the creators of Apple were watching that, and they were envisioning like,
Yeah,
okay, we got our thing. Let's document this in reality and let's get it, which is really a great thing that they did. Really,
it is.
honestly speaking.
It is. I absolutely agree. You have to imagine something way before you
Yeah.
actually go about developing it. You've got to imagine what it's going to look like. So
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, that's pretty important.
Absolutely, and they really put like real brains, behind creating that actual product. In Star Trek, they were showing it. It's like a product, but in reality, they said, okay, there is a possibility of creating this product, and that actually became a reality.
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
it's functional. It was in Star Trek for a while. He's reading
Yeah.
his whatever iPad and working
Yep.
out things with it. Right? Of course. It was a very obvious thing to do from that point onwards.
Indeed, indeed, for sure. Now, talking about action movies, who is your favorite Hollywood actor of all time? Like, which actor do you always enjoy the most? Whose movies you have always watched?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure I got one. so,
Okay.
so I like lots of different actors, but I'm I'm struggling to find a single one that's is really really out there. Um, yeah, maybe I can get back to you on that one.
No, no worries, no worries. It's all right. Okay, I'll just go for the next question then. So, Graf,
Sure.
since I'm Indian and I'm of the Indian origin, I'm pretty much keen to ask you this. Like, what is your favorite Indian food that you always like to try?
Oh, I love Indian curry. So in England, Indian curry is the number one favorite dish. It absolutely is. So when we got here, we just carried on going, and the Australian curries were a little different, but mostly are good. So I like most curries, many hot ones, spicy ones. Yeah, but I
Right.
eat curry a lot. So I love this. The food is fantastic. I would eat it almost every day if I could. Yeah, Indian curry is fantastic. I love the whole event around it. So it's great.
Okay. Amazing, amazing. So, Graham, since you come from UK, I just wanted to understand, like, what is that, go-to place that you would like to, recommend people when they visit your hometown in UK?
Oh, okay. So Portsmouth. Portsmouth is a historic town. It
Okay.
really is very old. So there's a big historic dockyard there, and they've got an old wooden ship that was back in a long time ago, and they've got some metal ships and sailing ships and things. It's really really steeped in heritage from I don't know the 900 1300. You go
Yeah.
back. And it's just got so much information. Interestingly, it used to be a dockyard and a building wooden ships. So when I was actually in the dockyard working for a while, the shipwright, the person who was dealing with wood nowadays, said, "So you've seen down there? There's some houses with very small windows. They're actually quite small." I said, "No, that must be because it's cold. It's keeping the heat in. Yeah, so you're not getting a lot of heat." He said, "No, that's nothing to do with that." He said, "When those houses were built, yeah, if you had a piece of wood that was from between your elbow and the end of your hand, that was considered an offcut. Yeah? So,
Okay.
so,
Right.
so, so, so people in the dockyard used to build their houses out of this. So they'd build window frames. So all the windows were really small, the
Yeah.
size of
Yeah.
between your elbow and your hand, because it
Oh
was
my
that
God.
size. So
Yeah.
it's steeped in enormous amounts of heritage, and you can go into Old Portsmouth, and there's still cobble streets and tram lines and all that the old heritage that is
Right.
really really ancient. It's
Mm.
very very old.
Nice.
So go see some of that. It's if you
Definitely.
know there's I think there's a out towards more towards Southampton, because Southampton and Portsmouth are quite close to each other. There's a
Yeah.
place called the Lone Barn. I think it was built in 1300, and
Oh, okay.
you can go in there and see some of those really old, really old places that are great. They're still functioning today as a big barn with thatch on the roof and stuff. But yeah, there was that. That's a long time ago. Australia doesn't have anything that old as a structure that I can put my head on. So
Yeah.
so yes, it's a lot of history down there.
Fantastic. I mean, talking about Portsmouth, you just gave me a complete, view about the historical places and, the old world charm, or let's say the classy places that, are there around the city. Now, when we talk about Perth, what is the thing that, you love the most about the city there?
Oh, to me, the beaches are fantastic. So Perth is fantastic. The summers and the beaches, we have some of the enormous amounts of white sand that go on for lots and lots of miles. and they're kilometers and kilometers. So as you go up to the northern part of Western Australia, there is a big reef out there. Everyone's heard of the Great Barrier Reef, but on
Yep.
Western Australia's side, there is the Ningaloo Reef, which is about 300 kilometers long. So it's pretty big, and the beaches up there are quite stunning. So white sands, beautiful sea, and what a place to live. It is fantastic. So I love about Perth and WA is the outdoors. It is fantastic.
Amazing, Graham. That's good to know. And when you talk about Portsmouth, how I recognize the city's name, because I see the Premier League, and there was a team called Portsmouth FC who was in the Premier League.
Yes, there is.
So,
There is.
yeah.
Yes, there
So
was.
that's how.
Yeah, there still is.
It's a good
Yes.
team, but they're not in the Premier League now. They're, I think, playing for the second tier or first tier, if I am not, if I'm correct on that. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. That yes, football is a big thing over there. I know they don't
Yeah.
call it soccer, they call it football, but yeah, it's pretty big over there, and everybody ends up watching it. So
I've seen about Portsmouth fans. They're so passionate about the game, and I really love that. Every city in England, has that passion, but Portsmouth fans, they have it something else. So I've even, read some article about it. I'm like, wow, so much thing to, talk about,
indeed.
Yeah. All right. Now, talking about, Portsmouth again, heading back to your hometown now, like what is the street food that, you miss the most, of your hometown?
So my family's still over there. I've got my local family here, but brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, even some parent are still over there. They're still living their lives in the same way, and when you go back to visit them, they are still exactly the same. It's missing the family that you have to do Zoom calls or Teams calls to actually get them to talk to.
Right,
But and then you're only there for a short while. So that's what I really miss. As far as the place is concerned, I think I will be living in Australia, the rest of my days. I really do think the lifestyle here is much more fantastic, especially in the summer, which is most of the time. I think in the UK it's just windy and cold and icy and you don't see the sunshine for 8 months of the year. So it has its benefits. And over here it's the other way around. You see the sunshine for 8 months, and then you miss it for a short 3 or 4 months of winter. So I'll take the sun any day.
I totally relate to your point. And, I was also in Melbourne, and I feel Melbourne's weather is very much similar to UK's weather, and it's pretty much chilly, windy. So,
yeah. And when it's hot, it's really hot.
oh my God, it's really bad. That weather is like something, like, I don't understand this. It's so cold. And when comes summer, it's like totally like burning out, and like, okay, this is how how the weather goes on. And yeah, now having said that, I'll have more 2 questions for you, Graham. So Graham, like, what is your favorite holiday destination, like out of Australia and out, if we exclude Australia and UK from the list, what is the other favorite holiday destination of yours?
So I quite like the Caribbean. I spent almost 5 months traveling around the Caribbean when I was in the Royal Navy on a warship. So that was lovely. So we visited many different places. It was pretty special. So that was kind of cool. Been back to the States a few times. That's kind of cool. When we used to take the kids out to Disneyland and all that stuff. So that's kind of cool. But I do like some of Europe as well. I like France. Spent some time in France working in Paris. So I got to know my way around there a little while. And Spain is lovely. Italy, I've not spent much time in there. Bit of skiing. And interesting fun fact, I actually went to Gibraltar 37 times.
Oh, 37 times. Oh, God.
Yes. There used to be a naval base right there, and the entrance to the. So every time you went past, you would stop off at Gibraltar. Yeah. So I knew Gibraltar High Street better than I did Portsmouth.
37 times is a big number, Graham. So definitely you'll know.
Yes.
Right.
Indeed. Interesting. So Europe. all over Europe is a so and Northern America and a bit of the Caribbean.
The Caribbean, right? So then the final question to you, let's say, the second final question to you, Graham. So Graham, like, what was the last song that you have heard, from your playlist, or let's say from anywhere for that matter?
Ooh. Um. Uh. Yeah. I've not been listening. So I like music from everywhere. I like music, a lot of different music. A lot of modern music, a lot of olden music. I like stuff from the 80s and the 90s and even 2000. I like a lot of female singers. I think they're really cool. I like music for everything that sounds good. So it's not one particular flavor. It's not one particular artist. To me it's a whole series of them. And what could that actually be? What as long as it makes me feel good it's got a good thing that I can either run to or listen to in the car or whatever. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. Absolutely, Graham. So the final question to you, Graham, since you told me that you love action movies, probably you might be liking the James Bond series, right? And also there is a very catchy kind of a coincidence here that, James Bond, also the fictitious character, is also from the British Royal Navy. So did you guys have an inside joke that James Bond comes from the Royal Navy, so that's a big, like, huge prestige kind of thing. Was there an inside joke of that?
I wish we were all like him, but no. He was a fictional character, and I'm sure there are some great spies that look like him, but he's a bit too fabulous in those days. The reality was a bit different.
All right, yeah, it is different. That's the film, but again, if you see him, you feel like you envy him for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all the reasons.
Indeed. He's a special character and quintessential English.
Yes,
British.
yes.
Absolutely.
Totally. I have a book. I just purchased a book in Melbourne, and that book reads. They actually made a collection of people, who they actually auditioned for Bond. Like everyone there would, like all the British actors, American actors, and they went through a huge sort of list, and I'm like, wow, to get a Bond character, from the entire sphere of the world, it's so difficult. So that shows the demand of the character, to be honest.
Absolutely. I think it was really fanciful, and yeah, we all aspire to be it.
Yeah, of course, for sure. Sorry. Yeah. So Graham. So finally, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule and being part of my podcast initiative. It was such a lovely conversation today. Especially I was totally floored by that timeline that you gave me of your journey, and I was like, a lot of cool stuff that you have experienced in your journey, and especially your rendezvous with Roy Hill Company, and working with all the three major capital projects, and especially your complete transition from the Royal British Navy to the IT space, and then understanding everything. Probably you had the best of everything, from the retro times to the latest technology. So which is quite an amazing journey. So I envy that, Graham, for sure, from your end, and such a lovely conversation it was. Thank you so much.
And thank you for taking the time and inviting me to this. And I'd just like to say to all your listeners that if you are interested, practicalea.com is the place to go. Go and register. And we're currently in pre-release, and we'll be looking for companies that are available to get involved in the pre-release before we actually go live, which is early next year.
Amazing. So listeners, so you've heard it from Graham. So if you need anything, if you have any help regarding, the practicalea.com, or, any questions related to enterprise architecture, and also the offer which Graham has just, given out, please feel free to reach out to him. And he's available on LinkedIn and with his name, Graham Davis. And he's always, there to, help you out with anything. So yes, Graham, so that actually, answers that, that actually explains everything now to our listeners. So it was a lovely conversation again, Graham. Thank you so much for, being part of this amazing podcast initiative. And it was a lovely conversation throughout. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, listeners, on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We will be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Goodbye, stay tuned, and au revoir. Thank you.